Thank you for having me. As you mentioned, in a theocracy that is the Islamic Republic of Iran, the Guardian Council, an incredibly powerful body that essentially pursues the final verdict of the supreme leader, and his mission has chosen six candidates. In fact, two of them are no longer in the race. We have conservative former nuclear negotiator Saeed Jalili, a man who is known as a yes man to the supreme leader. He disputes nothing and strictly follows the line and narrative of Khamenei, the country's supreme leader. And then you have Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf. He's another powerful man, incredibly influential, also within the conservative clout. He was a former mayor of Tehran, an IRGC general. He has a lot of influence with the Sepah, with the Basij, the forces that you see on the street cracking down against peaceful protesters, against people. So he's really not favored by the majority of the public. And then, of course, you have Masoud Pezeshkian, who is now regarded and known as a reformist and moderate voice. He was a former health minister under the presidency of President Hassan Rouhani. He's a physician himself, and the last person who's staying in the race is Mustafa Pourmamadi, who is a conservative cleric. But Yvonne, what I will say is that once again, Iran is facing an engineered election where all these candidates have been chosen by this body, and in ways are just there to put this theatrics and this circus that we have an election, and the elections historically since the Islamic Revolution have been a tool to legitimize the Islamic regime, but not really reflect the will of the people. And I will say, if I may, by the way, that Masoud Pezeshkian, the sort of reformist candidate right now, was, by the way, disqualified in 2021. So his presence in this election is seen by so many in Iran as just a way for the regime to evoke participation.
Well, less than half of the electorate voted in that last presidential election. That was viewed by many as very uncompetitive. As you've mentioned, many boycotted the poll. Do you think this election will be different with a higher voter turnout? It's different this time?
Oh, absolutely not. In fact, the opposite. I mean, you saw the mass protests and crackdown against people on the streets 2 years ago in the aftermath of the brutal death of Mahsa Jina Amini. And I will say, Yvonne, two events in the last 2-3 years have happened in Iran that really humiliated the public, that came out in the past few elections to vote. That was, again, the crackdown of the protests and also the downing of the Ukrainian plane crash back in 2020. So the Iranian public, majority of 88 million people, are disillusioned by this regime. They don't see any change from any camp. And the reformist candidate really, again, as orchestrated by the system and the regime, is there to bring out people. But with folks who I talk to on the ground, even people who have previously voted for reformist candidate, moderate voices are disillusioned and are not going to come to vote. When you speak with especially the young Iranians, the younger generation, the Gen Z, they see zero hope in this regime and in this system. And I think over and over, the events that have happened the last couple of years have proven that the people in establishment and the system does not hear the grievances of the Iranian public. And I think we will see that in this upcoming election.
So will it be a foregone conclusion then, very predictable? What are the likely scenarios that could come out of Friday's election?
Absolutely. Well, listen, we have two conservative candidates, Saeed Jalili and Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf. There were speculations that the two might unite, but at this stage, a day before, they haven't yet. Also, is a nuance here for your audience, that the existence of these two candidates reflect the fraction and the infighting, even within the conservative camps, even within the people, within the groups whose leader, in this case, Jalili and Ghalibaf, follow the lines of the supreme leader. So even within that conservative apparatus, there are infightings, right? And then you have Masoud Pezeshkian, who is struggling to get the gray votes, people who are not going to come out, people who, again, once voted reformists and moderates, but are now completely fed up and see through this circus. So there's a chance for runoff, but ultimately, let's remember, whoever wins this election will follow the policies of the supreme leader and the regime. And we are not going to see fundamental changes unless those changes are dictated by the supreme leader, whether that's domestically or in Iran's foreign policy.
Well, as you mentioned, we know it is a supreme leader who holds the power in the country, but is there hope that the next president could have some sort of impact on daily life? What limited powers will he have?
You know, I'm glad you mentioned the daily lives of people. Iran's economy is at its most dismal, and I've been covering Iran for many years, and it's, you know, you think, you know, it's not going to get worse, it's not going to get worse, but it keeps getting worse. People are struggling to make ends meet. People have many grievances. Young people are desperate to leave the country. In fact, Iran has one of the highest number of college graduates who are unemployed, and there's hopelessness. So the person who will come in power needs to see this. But again, over and over, every single administration has proven that they don't represent the Iranian people. They don't represent their grievances. So the likelihood of any major change is not there. And also, the debates that we've heard, I mean, very few, first of all, forget about the conservatives, but even with Masoud Pezeshkian, there was very, limited policies that he presented when it comes to affecting the asks of the Iranian people and women, talking about the hijab mandates, civil rights, and, you know, freedom of choice, freedom of press, freedom of life. So really, again, people can see through this. Very little change can come unless, again, it's a bigger change in the regime's policy.
Well, Tara, we'll be watching closely from here. Thank you so much for your time and talking to the world tonight. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.